I'm delighted to have Gail Swift join me next. Gail is fiercely committed to guiding students and families to take action in their natural abilities. As a proven professional, Gail can guide you to address how your child solves problems, questions to motivate them, and their ideal career. Gail's work impacts lives such as Brittany, a 15-year-old with anxiety who believed that she was not normal, when in fact, it's just the way that her normal worked for her. And Taylor, who Gail worked with as a high school senior to make sure she was spot on with her electives and internships to fit her pattern. What really excites Gail is knowing that every single student is created with a pattern of taking action that does not change over time. That pattern predicts their path, which leads to their purpose. Join me and Gail next. Gail, thank you so much for being with us today.
It is my pleasure, Denise. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you've got some really interesting methods when it comes to helping our kids figure out basically what they're going to do with their lives. And I really want to get kind of into this methodology and what it means, not only to you, but to our kids and our families. It seems to be more than just finding your way in life, but it's more, it includes like a communication tool. And I'm really loving everything, although it's a little bit, that I understand and know about what you do. So as far as finding your way, finding what careers our kids should be in, as parents, we kind of look at that and say, well, we should be, kind of watching our kids, mental notes of what things interest them, et cetera, to kind of help guide them along. And for some kids, that's enough. But for some kids, that's not enough. For some kids, my own son, as one, literally had no direction. When it came time for him to make a decision for college and his career, he looked at me with this deer in the headlights look. And he was terrified because he thought he was making a decision to be in a cubicle for the rest of his life. How do we help our kids not have that fear and have confidence that whatever they're choosing now is a stepping stone to their future? I guess that's a good way to put it.
That's a loaded question. And I just want to, for a baseline, Denise, you and I both believe in youth. We believe in the power of youth. And we also believe that just because you're young doesn't mean you're any more or less capable than an adult. I think that is important for your listeners to understand, that we are of the same ilk in thinking flat out with that. And we try very, tell me if I'm wrong, we're in agreement on this.
Oh, 100%. Kids, I don't care how young they are, seriously,
right,
can make a huge impact. I'll give you a small, little teeny tiny example. My son was 3.5 years old. It was the summer, and I sent him to a cute little summer camp. It was 3 hours in a morning, right? Not a big deal for little kids. While he's at this summer camp on the very first day, he's riding one of those giant tricycles, not a normal size one, but one of the big ones. And he's riding it around this courtyard area. And he doesn't really understand the physics of this, and he falls over. He falls over and breaks his collarbone.
Oh.
So as a mom, I didn't know what had happened. The teachers didn't know what had happened. So it didn't take long, though, like for me to figure out something's wrong with my child. And I called his doctor, and she said, do this. And within seconds, we knew it was a broken collarbone. He needed to go to the hospital. Cool. Let's talk about kids making an impact. At 3 years old, my son is being handheld, taken to the x-ray. He turns to the nurse as he's walking and says, do you know my Jesus? Let me tell you about my Jesus. It's a little thing, but children of any age can impact. They can impact the world around them. It doesn't have to be, digging a well for an indigenous peoples. it can be as simple as having a conversation. So yes, you and I think, are definitely on the same page when it comes to understanding that kids, there's so much they can do in this world, and they can do it from as young as talking, from as young as 3 years old.
Absolutely. Amen. I got goosebumps when you were telling that story. I love that. I got goosebumps all over. There is power, absolutely power in a child, and especially with the name of Jesus, for sure. As far as the blueprint, so what I work with is the third part of the mind called cognitive. It is every child is born with, every person is born with God-given innate talents. And Kathy Kolbe developed an algorithm in 1987 to bring out or expose what those talents are in people. And children as young as 3 years of age, I work with to highlight their natural talent, gifts, and abilities. So you and I, obviously on the same page, believing in the power of kids. And like you said in the beginning, good parents and parents in general will observe and help and walk with a student through life and through things. And it's easy to see if they like karate or ice skating or football, and then you gravitate towards what they like. And maybe on a team, if they're playing a team sport, maybe they're a guard, maybe they're a right wing, and all of these things. As parents, we want to do things that keep them successful. And not only will they like what they're successful at, but I believe that when they know their pattern, or their parents know their pattern, they are given a blueprint of power for how that student takes action. And when you have the blueprint, there doesn't have to be so much trial and error, because you can see when that child gravitates towards something and you're holding up the blueprint and you're like, okay, now I understand. Now this makes sense, because they're in their lane and they're doing their thing. And when you have that as a parent, it's easier, or it was for me, to witness trials and successes, because you're holding the blueprint. So when the child is about to embark on a really hard thing, even when they're young, Denise, even when they make a mess or they spill something or break something, you have the blueprint. So instead of taking that child out of a hard situation, you're able to guide and say, hey, you know what? I see this is hard for you, but I know that if you get more information, you're going to have exactly what you need. Let's do that together. Or how can I support you in that? And it is beautiful, because with that comes, I think it breeds passion. With that freedom breeds passion. And then when the student is passionate, they're engaged and they take ownership, which is an amazing thing to see in a student.
That is really awesome, Gail. So what I'm hearing is that what you've learned over the course of, I don't know how many years, and through this particular methodology, it's more than just what career path should my kid take. It's parenting your child, right?
Yes.
It's literally parenting your child in a way that, saying that it supports them sounds so namby-pamby, in all honesty. It's more than that. It's helping them to figure out life. It's some of it is a way of thinking, so that they can understand the world around them and be able to interact with it in a way that gives them control.
Yes. Then what I found is they're not as afraid, or the parents aren't as afraid to release the grip on the how something gets done, because they know it will get done when that student or that person is motivated to do it. There needs to be motivation. And when they have the freedom to choose, then they're motivated and there's passion there. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think that my parenting style was in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. My child's preschool teacher, it was Montessori preschool, held a parenting course for about 6 weeks or so. And it was, I cannot remember the book that she used. I really wish I could, because it was phenomenal. One of the best things about this book is that it allows for choices for your child. One of the things that I find that giving and allowing your child of any age choices to make their own choices allows for them to understand that process as they get older. They learn how to discern between good and bad, because there is a good and bad in this world. Sorry, that's just the way the world is.
Yes.
And the choices that you make have consequences. So they have to understand what those choices are. And in the beginning, when they're young, it's allowing for choices that are both good or both okie dokie with mom and dad. You know, for example, I distinctly remember when my child was probably, I don't know, she was probably 4 or 5 years old. She was playing outside in the front yard with another friend, and it was time to come in for dinner. So I gave her the choice because she didn't want to come in. I said, well, you can either walk in or I can carry you in. Which would you like? And she had to make a choice. Having those kind of choices is helpful. Now, I don't know how you feel about this particular parenting style, but in addition, many of the things that, or instructions that I gave to my children growing up came with an explanation. I rarely used because I said so. Although as my children got older, I realized once in a blue moon, you do have to throw that out. Because they do need to understand there is there is an authority, right? And even when mom and dad are helpfully giving you all of this explanation on why you should do X, Y, and Z, your teacher at school or your teacher at church for your religious studies and the police officer who's knocking on your window is not going to give you an explanation as to why he's asking you to open your window. So sometimes
good point.
Just throw out because I said so now and then. But with giving these explanations helped my children to process the reasons why this thing that I'm asking them to do is necessary, why it's a good thing, et cetera, or a bad thing if I'm asking them not to do something. I think that what you are showing us in the work that you do is that it's not just how to find your way, how to help your kid. It's an awesome thing to do. Yes. If your child is a high school senior and they have lost their way or they don't know what they're going to do with life, call Gail. We can start there. You don't have to be a 3-year-old, right? But if you have younger kids too, start there because you can develop this in them even when they're younger, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, it is already there. It just brings it out. So yes.
I think that's the awesome thing is that you're born with this.
Yes, you are.
So tell us some of the different things that come out from this evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you are born with a way of taking action and what it measures. And when I say it, I'm talking about with students in particular, it's called a student aptitude quiz or SAQ for short. I'll be referring to it as SAQ. And with adults, it is a Kolbe A, which stands for adult, Kolbe A index. And on both of those assessments, there are 4 colored bars. The first bar is red. And the red bar, a long red bar, indicates a need. These are not wants, Denise. They are needs, a need for a lot of information to make your best decision. A short red line means that you do not need a lot of information or you need to simplify and have bullet points to make your best decision. There is no good or bad or right or wrong with any of these. It is just the way it is. So there's no judgment. There's no emotion attached to it. It is simply that student's innate way of taking action. The blue line is the second line. A long blue line is your need for systems and structure and organization. A short blue line is your need to skip steps and shortcut, go around, do something different, adapt. The third line is green, and a long green line is your need for risk and uncertainty. And a short green line is your need to stabilize and make sure things are status quo, no surprises. The last line of the Colby report is yellow, and a long yellow line is your need to get your hands on the world to make your best decisions, and need to touch. Haptic is a word that Kathy uses a lot to explain this mode. Haptic is a sense of touch. You need to touch the world. A short yellow line is your need to envision how something will look physically. You don't need to touch it. These are all needs, and everyone is somewhere on a continuum. In each of the modes, it's from 1 to 10. And the only difference in a 1 or a 10 is time spent in that mode. Time spent in that mode is the difference between a 1 or a 10. You cannot have more than 50% of your MO in any one, like you can, I would say have two bars that are long and 2 that are short, but you cannot have every line be a 10, or every line isn't a 1. So how I describe it is we are all whole. We're born without void, without deficit. We are perfectly made, perfectly wired to solve problems. This is where it gets fun. Since we're not wired to do everything, that's why we have other people around us to help us fill in the blanks or the gaps, or help us so we can work together to make the best decision. Does that make sense?
I think so. So I want to go back to the fact that nobody's going to be all 10s on all long bars,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
Now, when you were just describing them, I was thinking that I'm on the lower end for the first 2 for sure, and my husband's on the upper end for the first 2 for sure. So as you're describing them, I'm thinking, there needs to be a marriage class or a spouse's class on how to deal with opposites,
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting though that you're not going to be all the way up there. So if you have 2 long bars, would your other 2 be more in the middle ish, or would they be more
shorter?
Okay.
Or shorter. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how does knowing this information about yourself or about your family members help you interact with your family, with your teens, and help you to make decisions going forward for your life when careers and stuff may be up in the air?
Yes, absolutely. I'll give you some household examples that I'm sure you'll get a kick out of. I have 2 sons, 14 and 16 years of age. And my 14-year-old has an MO, a modus operandi, or a 4-digit number that is the opposite of most teachers, the exact opposite. So he was in school and he obviously felt less than in 3rd grade because of the way he works, the way he's born. Can't change it. It's just the way he is. Can't make it different. But as far as a household example, I was going down a school route, but I'm going to go a household route. So just this morning, he said to me, "What's your work schedule, Mom? How many times can I barge in on you?"
Oh my gosh. That's
okay.
Wonderful.
So, right. Meaning that's what he does. So the way he works is he just barges in and just starts talking and just comes in and just does whatever, because that's how he works. Now, if I didn't know that and it's conative, I would say, don't you know better? Can't you be different? When are you going to learn? Those are that's the kind of tone I would have. And I did have that tone before I knew this about him. And so what I was doing is I was making his innate talent, I was judging his innate talent, and I was making it a bad character flaw when it's not. It's not. And he knows how he works. I know how he works. He's a negotiator. But with that comment, I said X amount of hours, I can be interrupted at this time. And there's a communication that happens between us because we both know how the other one works. And when it's clearly communicated to parents and then kids know, it makes it easier. And I stop judging what I don't like. I accept it and I communicate. Does that make sense?
I love it. I love it. The thought that came to mind, and maybe totally unrelated, is the fact that in the last, at least 20 years or longer, we've taken PE out of schools. And yes, kids, especially boys in general, need to run around. They've got energy that they need to, expel. And they get a little squirmy in their seats if they don't have that opportunity. Yet teachers want kids to sit still and be able to concentrate and take care of business in the classroom, but they haven't given them the opportunity to get rid of or vent out some of that energy that is necessary. So instead, we medicate our kids, again, in general. Yes, there are some that's necessary, but in general, to keep them still. And so to me, what you're saying, and again, it may have nothing to do with this, but I'm looking at that, realizing here's another possibility of where understanding the other person instead of judging, well, you're just too squirmy, you can't sit still. Well, that's a judgment.
It's absolutely conative what you're talking about. Colby did a study of 597 kids that were diagnosed with ADD and ADHD in Arizona. Out of those 597 students, they tested every one of them conatively and realized they were like my son. And 10% of them legitimately had ADD and ADHD. The rest of them were conative opposites of teachers. If I didn't know this about him, he would have been on meds. He would have been in a doctor's care, and we'd probably still be fighting, and I would not have a relationship with my son.
Wow. That is really intuitive to be able to have this knowledge about our kids and ourselves and how we operate, right? Because then you can make adjustments within your own household. And I'm going to assume once you know these things, once the child, the teenager knows these things about themselves, there may be ways of helping them understand how to interact with their teachers and their loved ones and their bosses. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So remember, I said at the beginning that freedom breeds passion. Couple things. When he realized this, I think he was in 3rd grade in elementary school. We realized this and we went to the teacher, and he wanted to be the guy, the fix-it guy. So he came up with the idea of being able to get up and fix school like desks or clocks that needed turning back or light bulbs that went out, things that he could do to get up. Then one day he stopped coming home with his homework sheets. And I said, where are your homework sheets? I don't really care for those anyway, but it's interesting. I'm not seeing a whole bunch of paper. And he said, well, I've decided, Mom, to take the ding. And I said, take the ding on what? And he said, well, I asked my teacher how much it would cost. What would be the price of not turning in my homework? And she said, it would be a 10% ding on your grade. And he said, I'll take it. I'll take it. I love that example because that is a perfect analogy of him deciding and dealing with the consequences. And he was in 3rd grade.
Wow.
This happened. He's in that was 3rd grade. He's a freshman in high school. 3 weeks ago were semester exams. He's not doing so well in one of his classes, not doing well at all. And he knows it. And his friend said to him, Tyler, aren't your parents mad or super upset because of how you're doing in this class? And he said, that's my responsibility, not theirs.
Wow.
He's a 14-year-old freshman. Like, who
That's
says
incredible.
that? I didn't even say that. Like, that's incredible in my opinion. And
It is.
so him talking to his counselor, he worked out an arrangement for the second half of the year. And that's his arrangement. I have no idea how to check his grades or his homework. He's on it. And he has an MO that naturally would not be. It's difficult for him. It is uphill. He is a salmon in school. It is tough. So what he's doing after this podcast, we are going to the bank because he is starting his business this week called Swift Welds. And he has commissions and jobs for welding. He's a welder.
That's incredible.
And he is starting his own, he's starting his own business. I think that's awesome. Yes.
That is phenomenal. That's just to be able to take responsibility and know where to go when you need help to the counselor is something other kids don't usually even figure that out until sometime during college, if they figure that out at all.
Right. Right. Yeah, I know. So,
but here's a big question. This type of assessment has been around for decades.
It has.
And I'll be honest with you, Gail, I didn't know about it until I met you, a year or so ago.
I know. I remember you saying that.
Like, where has this been all this time? And that's the big question is why isn't this type of thing out there in the world to help families, to help teachers even? Come on, let's think about it. If everyone had this assessment and they came into their new school, their new high school, whatever, with, here's my page, this is who I am, don't you think that would be an advantage to the teachers who understood how this works? I'm just saying. Isn't that common sense?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So common. Yes. And as a matter of fact, I am working with a school. They are using Kolbe as an initiate, like it's the first thing kids are going to do. The teachers are going to have their Kolbe score. The students are going to have their Kolbe score. And so everyone's going to know how the other one solves problems. And yes, that's an entrance requirement for the school I'm working with. So to answer your question, where has it been? Why isn't it around? Kathy Kolbe developed the algorithm in 1987. Her main focus was adults and businesses. And she also said, Denise, that it does not change over time. It's valid and reliable. Now,
amazing.
There are certain tests that are valid and there are certain tests that are reliable, but to have both in one assessment is very rare. So she said it is valid and reliable over time in 20 years. So over 20 years went by and she decided to do a retest study to prove her theory. And she did. She retested after 20 years. And the people that retested were within 94 to 96% of where they were 20 years earlier. She just released the ability to work with youth, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And the reason is when you work with a student, when you work with a child, or you're talking to the parents, you're talking to the kid, it is, I can't, you can tell by my face and my voice, it is extremely important to use the correct words, to use the correct verbiage, because every one of these talents is a gift. Every single one. And that student needs to know that it's a gold mine for them. They're housing an amazing powerhouse of action, and teaching them how to use that is where teachers and parents come in. But to be able to articulate that to a young person well the first time is where the training has come in. And she picked 12 people in the world to kick this off. I was one of the original people that she chose to teach this to youth. And so my goal is to have every 15-year-old in the world know how they work when free to be themselves. And I'm working on that this year. And I have been, but I'll be continuing to work on that for the rest of my life.
I love it. I love it. It's a great opportunity basically for everyone. When you have kids that understand this and parents that understand it, and then eventually, hopefully it'll get more out there in the world so that it becomes something that is easy for everyone and such a positive life. You're actually, it's not just a positive experience with work or a positive experience, with other people you interact with, but it's your entire life.
Oh, I'm going to make a connection. Can I make a connection to Colby and the career thing too, Denise?
Absolutely. Please do.
So when I got certified in January of 2016, my goal was to connect people with their careers, because it's so disheartening to see people in a wrong career. I know you know what that feels like. And it hurts me. It like physically hurts my belly to see that. So my goal was to put people basically where they belong in their lane based on how they naturally work or their natural God-given talents. In 1991, when I took it, I had 15 careers that were given to me. When I went to get certified in 2016, I thought that would happen again because my husband took it in 1997. His careers were on. So I assumed that would be listed. And apparently 1997 was the last year that careers were on. And she said, Gail, hang on. I've been working on something for 10 years. And in 2017, it's about to be launched. And it was, and it is called OpGig, Opportunity Gig Career Assessment. The reason this is a big deal to me is because OpGig tells you your ideal careers, taking into consideration how you work when free to be yourself. It's the only career assessment in the world that takes into consideration someone's cognitive makeup or God-given talents and abilities. So, for example, my son, Tyler, that I was talking about earlier, took OpGig. His number one career that showed up was marine mammal trainer, smoke jumper, high risk, high physical risk. I knew you get it. I mean, you totally get it. Cabinet maker, construction worker. So you see where this is going. So you see there's a dovetail, there's a connection to how someone works and their ideal contribution in the world. So if he doesn't have a need for detail, and if he doesn't have a need for systems, he's not going to be an accountant.
Right.
That might be obvious to a parent over time, but someone in his life may be steering him in a direction other than his own. And when he has the knowledge of knowing how he works, he can decide to say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would work for someone else, but it doesn't work for me.
That is so fabulous. And, because let's face it, a lot of people, a lot of parents and high school counselors would look at a child who does well in, let's say, science and math and say, oh, cool. Well, you should probably go into some type of STEM area. Perhaps you could be an engineer, or perhaps you could be XYZ. Well, just thinking about it, not all of them would be hands-on working with something that is active. Some of them would be just the opposite, that a student or an adult would be more comfortable not interacting with other people, maybe being more in an enclosed environment where they get to work alone and just hone in and do their work, right? That's where they need to be. So this is an incredible opportunity, I think, for parents and teens to be able to not only find out how you work internally, but what type of careers go along with that, so that you don't end up like the 85% of people in the working world today who basically hate their job.
I know.
It's sad.
I know.
It's sad. I mean, if you're literally working for the purpose of retirement because you just freaking can't stand what you do, why would you do it for 40 years? There's
Right.
got to be a better way. And I think that this is definitely an opportunity that parents and students need to consider. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely is right. Yes.
You have given us so much to think about. And I know that this has probably blown a lot of their minds. Keep in mind, parents, this is not the first time that I've talked with Gail. It's probably the third or fourth time. And so I've had an opportunity to kind of let some of this soak in and understand it a little bit better.
Mhm.
But I encourage you to get on a call with Gail, have a 20-minute consult and just
Mhm.
try to understand what it is that she's doing and if it would be a good idea for you to consider this as a family or just
Mhm.
for your child, whatever you think works best for your family. But certainly this is an awesome opportunity. And I think it's not something that that comes along every day. And it should not be something you just put on the shelf and leave for later, especially since, hey, this doesn't change. Why not do it now? Right?
Yes,
That's the cool
that's
part.
correct. It does not change.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, Gail, how can our parents and families get in touch with you?
Absolutely. And you are right about that 20-minute consult. I would love to give that to your listeners. And they are welcome to email me at gail@planstoprospercoaching.com.
Awesome. We will have that link in the show notes. Gail, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I'm so excited about this process. I think that a lot of people, parents, students, adults, really need to know more about this and more about themselves so they can make sure they are on the right track.
Thank you for the opportunity, Denise.
This is Denise Thomas, your debt-free college coach.